This is Midnight Sun. As we did last week, we will start today with some information that can be quite worrying. We will start by talking about issues that we need to talk about, simply because it is the reality in which we are living. Even if it may be distressing for some people, we can understand that. But like last week, we'll end with a call to radical hope and a call to action. So just bear with any discomfort you may feel in the first part of this program and listen, please. It is important that you listen. In any case, if you feel anxious about what we are talking about here, I refer you to episode number 3 of Midnight Sun, where we talked about eco-anxiety and how to overcome it. Today we will talk about a research project that has raised a lot of buzz in the last 10 days. However, it should make more of a stir. It should be headline news in every newspaper and on every news program. But the media that live on ratings and money, they are afraid to do so. This research comes from the University of Utrecht, a study published in the journal Science Advances on the 9th of February, which has been echoed by the British newspaper The Guardian. It is authored by René van Westen, Michael Cliffuis and Henk Dijkstra from the Institute for Marine and Atmospheric Research at the University of Utrecht. And it is a research study which talks about the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning circulation. You may have seen it in some media headlines. It is one of the latest scientific studies on this current, and it is really worrying. Specifically, Van Westen says, it is not science fiction. Alarmist or not, he says, this is not only a Hollywood blockbuster, The Day After Tomorrow. This is real, this can happen, and I think it is important and urgent to keep saying to people, okay, we need to really tackle our emissions. Well, that is what we are going to talk about today, and as I say, we will end with a call for hope and a call for action. If you think this program does not concern you, you are probably wrong. It does concern you. And it concerns you because it is talking about your future. And not just your future. It is talking about the future of your loved ones. So, if I were you, I would listen to it. Even if it makes you a bit apprehensive at first, we will end up fine. But as long as we start moving, as long as we take action.
Midnight Sun, directed by Grian Cutanda.
So welcome to Midnight Sun. Welcome to everyone, whatever your ideas, whatever your social background, your life situation, your living conditions, your beliefs, your values. Perhaps you have landed on this podcast by accident. Maybe you have arrived here by chance, but I have to tell you that, according to Carl Gustav Jung, the famous Swiss psychologist, you have most probably been brought here by synchronicity. And in any case, if you have come here, I want to give you a message that is important for your future well-being and that of the people you love. So, you should listen carefully, and above all, you should listen carefully to the end of this program, because it is what will allow you to move forward and go with all your strength to try to live a more habitable world for the people who come after you. So, whatever your view of the world, welcome to our program, because if you follow us to the end, you will end up seeing the world in a very different way.
Midnight Sun is a radio program that seeks to foster the process of social transformation needed to address the social, climate, and extinction emergency we are now entering. Our goal, that you put your talents at the service of the Earth and the terrestrial community of life. Join the tribe at the Midnight Sun, the social media hub of the Rainbow Warriors 3.5 global campaign.
Well, we said we were going to talk about the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, the Atlantic Ocean section of a long network of marine rivers that runs through the world's oceans. This current is something like a conveyor belt of heat, but also of nutrients. Nutrients that move through the ocean and on which the creatures that live in the seas feed. But this also has an impact on those of us who live on land. One section of the AMOC is what we have been calling the Gulf Stream, which is responsible, note this, is responsible for the fact that Europe does not have the climate of Canada. Thanks to this current, Europe is not covered with ice in its northern part as is Canada, because Europe is at the same latitudes of the northern United States and Canada. This current warms as it moves up from Antarctica towards the equator, until from the Gulf of Mexico it heads towards the western coast of Europe. This current brings warmth and moisture to the western coast of Europe. Subsequently, when this stream reaches the coast of Greenland and enters the Arctic Ocean, its water becomes denser, colder, and more salty. And with that, the current sinks into the ocean depths, and from these latitudes returns southwards as cold water to cool the tropical and equatorial zones. In other words, this conveyor belt of nutrients and temperature would be bringing warmth to the western coasts of Europe and coolness to the tropical and equatorial coasts. And what is going on with it? Well, we are told that we have a serious problem with it. We are going to refer again, as we did in episode number 3, to Antonio Turiel, who is a scientist at the Spanish National Center for Scientific Research. He is working at the Institute of Marine Sciences in Barcelona, in the Department of Physical and Technological oceanography. Turiel is one of the people who has been warning for a long time about the situation we are heading into, especially with the rise in ocean temperatures. In an interview that you can find on YouTube, I leave the link in the credits, but I have to say that it is in Spanish. He says textually, one of the things that, for example, we know from direct measurement is that right now the flow of the AMOC is at its minimum of the last 10,000 years. That is, since the end of the last ice age. We would be at a minimum point in the amount of water that it is transporting. This is saying Antonio Turiel. In other words, it seems to be stopping. This current, the AMOC, seems to be coming to a halt. Antonio Turiel says that this was already beginning to be seen in the 1960s. They began to see that the current was weakening. He says, we have a lot of indications that the AMOC is slowing down because there is a drought in Europe, and the first effect of the slowdown, because you start to notice the effects when it is slowing down, not when it has stopped. This is progressive, explains Turiel. So the first effect you notice is this, that there is a decrease in humidity. And the next thing you see is that the North Atlantic is getting warmer than it should be, which is exactly what we are seeing. We are seeing indications that are exactly in line with the observations we have. In other words, Antonio Turiel is warning us that the situation is getting worse and worse, and the latest report, which came out just a fortnight ago, is giving us a very serious warning that the Gulf Stream is in danger of coming to a halt. Like in that film, The Day After Tomorrow, maybe you remember. Of course, it is not going to be like that. That was a movie. Here we look at what science is anticipating might happen. But let's remember that they are simply stating that there is a risk, there is an uncertainty. You can't say exactly what would happen if it stops, but there is a clear and obvious risk. Let's see how the problem evolves. At first, we have been basing ourselves on the models of the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change, the IPCC. This panel said that the AMOC did not seem likely to stop before the year 2100. However, as Antonio Turiel comments, the IPCC did not expect a cold water blob south of Greenland until the planet reached 2 degrees Celsius of global warming, that is 2 degrees above the pre-industrial temperature. The problem is that this blob of cold water south of Greenland has already appeared, and it appeared when we had reached only 1 degree Celsius of global temperature increase compared to pre-industrial times. Conclusion: it seems that the change is going faster than the scientific community originally expected. In a study that took place between July and August 2023, we were already warned that we are approaching a tipping point. And in that study, they said that the AMOC could stop not after the year 2100, but between 2025 and 2095, with a high possibility towards the 2050s. As you can see, the uncertainty is great on this issue. But the problem has become more pressing with the results of this study published a fortnight ago by Van Westen and his colleagues, which suggests that the collapse may take place much sooner than expected. Well, we are going to have to think about this. We are going to have to look at it face to face, look it in the eye. And then we are going to have to think about what we are going to do. Because we'll need to make decisions. But first, let's see what effects all this can have. We'll look at it right away.
In a world facing an uncharted future because of the planetary emergency we are now entering, we need voices to help sow the radical hope that we can build an alternative tomorrow. Become a patron, and for $1 a month, join our tribe. Find us on Patreon as Midnight Sun.
Midnight Sun, if you are listening to us, consider yourself already part of the tribe. Well, we were talking about the Atlantic Meridional Overturning circulation and the Gulf Stream, as we would have called it in the past. Well, we were seeing that it seems to be coming to standstill, and we were going to talk to you now about what the effects might be if this stream comes to a halt. What could they be? There is a lot of uncertainty. The scientific community is trying to see what could happen, but there can be no complete certainties. What there are certainly possible risks. Among them, it seems that if this current were to be stopped, it would lead Europe into an ice age. Europe would probably be the continent most affected by the shutdown of the AMOC. They estimate that sea ice in winter would reach as far south as the British Isles. But as I say, it would not only affect Europe, it would affect quite large areas of the planet to a large extent. Among the global consequences would be that the heat, which is now absorbed by Europe, would stay in the ocean. This would mean that this heat would not leave the tropical and equatorial zones, which would lead to an overheating of these regions and countries, especially in the northern hemisphere. This could be a death sentence for the Amazon rainforest and all its species, and is likely to severely affect the Congolese rainforest in Africa as well. And although to a lesser extent, it could affect the monsoons in Asia. If the cold, salty water does not sink to the coast of Greenland and the Arctic, if it does not sink to the ocean depths and from there return southwards, there will be a disconnection between the water surface layers and the deep layers of the Atlantic Ocean. This disconnection would cause an overflow of water, which would lead to a rise in sea level, especially in the North Atlantic, and particularly along the eastern coasts of the United States and Canada. The rise could range from 70 centimeters to 1 meter. This could be catastrophic indeed, as many coastal cities would have to be abandoned, and this would mean a forced migration of climate refugees from the coasts inland. Attention then to the east coast of the United States. I am thinking of New York or Miami. Moreover, the increase in the temperature of the Atlantic, with the extremes heat not being transmitted to Europe, would make hurricanes even more likely. Last year, according to Turiel, and without the AMOC having stopped, there was a high probability of Category 4 hurricanes in the Atlantic off Porto in northern Portugal. Another possible effect of the stopping of the AMOC current would be that, and I quote Antonio Turiel, Europe would be buried under snow. And we are not talking about a couple of meters of snow. Turiel says that Paris could be buried under 50 meters of snow. We would also be talking about climate refugees from northern Europe to the south. Turiel says that it is possible that this ice sheet did not reach Spain, but that the glaciation of northern Europe would undoubtedly bring climate refugees from northern Europe to the Mediterranean. Imagine what that could mean in terms of social destabilization and tensions, economic destabilization, and so on and so forth. It would possibly be chaos. In fact, Antonio Turiel confesses that the appearance of this research by Van Westen and colleagues a couple of weeks ago has come as a shock to him, because of the recognition that the collapse of the AMOC could happen much sooner than expected. Antonio Turiel says textually, "What has been a blow, because I recognize that even for me, it has been a blow, in spite of everything I have been through, and how tough my skin is. What has been a blow, I repeat, has been the study that appeared in Science Advances recently, because it really is a blow. Very hard, because basically in this paper, I won't go into the details because it is a very technical paper, is that there is an overestimation of the impact of freshwater influx on a global scale. And with relatively modest freshwater inputs from continental melt, there is an arrest of the AMOC, and it's rapid. In other words, among the most striking messages of this study is that in 25 years, the flow would be reduced by 90%. Fortunately, he adds, this is a model. This is not a reality. This has to be remembered. In other words, it is a model, a forecast, like a weather forecast. We can only work with models, with forecasts that we compute to make estimates. This is a model, fortunately, he says. Fortunately, it is a model. It is not yet reality. I have to remember this, insists Antonio Turiel. And he says, textually, but we do see a possible transition, and a transition that could take place in as little as 25 years. And then he specifies it in the following way. If this is so, well, then there is a message that I think could not be more terrible. There is a real risk. And he says again, there is no certainties. There are no certainties here. These are neither forecasts nor prophecies. But there is a real risk of a transition which may already be starting, and which could be as rapid as a few decades, and in which most of Europe would become uninhabitable. The magnitude would be so great and the effect so rapid that no adaptation is possible. This study says so explicitly. And another researcher, specifically Peter Ditlevsen of the Niels Bohr Institute at the University of Copenhagen, adds that there has been a lot of discussion on this issue. How should agriculture prepare for this? You cannot adapt to this. There are some studies of what happens to agriculture in Great Britain, and it becomes like trying to grow potatoes in northern Norway. These are the words of Peter Ditlevsen from the University of Copenhagen. Coming back to Turiel, in the Spanish language YouTube interview linked below, he adds, another one of the tremendous messages in this study is that Europe would cool by 3 degrees per decade. That is a staggering amount. Snow would cover practically all of Paris, the British Isles, the Netherlands, Belgium, northern Germany, part of Poland, obviously the Scandinavian peninsulas, Denmark, and so. But that doesn't mean it would be more habitable to the south. These are the words of Antonio Turiel. This means that the north would be uninhabitable, but the south would also be affected. When he wonders what might happen to Spain, he says that, well, being a place where there is a clash between the cold of the north and the heat of the Mediterranean, the conditions would perhaps be more bearable. The problem is that climate refugees would arrive from all over Europe. He says, Spain may be lucky, Italy may be lucky, Greece may be lucky, but Northern Europe is doomed. Finally, in an attempt to explain why the Dutch scientists are so direct and harsh in their statements in this study, Turiel explains, another thing that should be conveyed about the state of mind of the scientific community is that we are a little fed up with putting up with as much nonsense as we are putting up with as many insults, as many attacks. We are trying to do what we can in a dramatic situation. This is a serious problem, that there is a part of society that is not accepting the explanations of science, a part of society which the far right is blatantly manipulating, something we talked about in the previous episode of Midnight Sun. This is similar to what happens in the United States, where the creationists deny science outright. Antonio Turiel limits himself here to expressing that scientists are fed up with having to endure so much nonsense from people who have no idea what they are talking about, and that makes other people not take seriously what is going on. But ultimately, what we have to take from all this, because if not, we are going to be sunk, we are going to become desperate, we are going to sink into pessimism. And it is not necessary, because we can do many things. What we have to take from all that Antonio Turiel says is that, literally, uncertainty is huge. What is not uncertainty is risk. That is, the risk is clear, he says. There is a risk that our civilization will collapse, especially in Europe due to the stopping of the AMOC current. But this is not a sure thing. These are not prophecies. Science is not making prophecies. They are simply saying, we are seeing this, and this could happen with all the data we have, with the best of our information, with the best of our knowledge. We are warning that there is a serious risk. That is what the science is saying. It is not saying this is going to happen unfailingly. This is what I want you to keep in your mind. At no point does it say that this will happen for sure. It is a risk which we have to face, and that means we have to do something about it. And that is what we are going to talk about from this point onwards. As hard as the times ahead may be, at Midnight Sun we will keep believing that we can still build an alternative future. Our secret, radical hope, however unreal it may seem. Join the tribe of Midnight Sun. Join the tribe of all colors of Midnight Sun. Join the tribe of Rainbow Warriors 3.5, the global campaign we are launching from Midnight Sun. And to unblock a little of this concern about the AMOC current, we are going to tell a story from the Earth Stories collection, which is relevant to what we are going to start talking about from now on. It is a story called The Old Wise Man, a story that is told in very different cultures, from Myanmar to Turkish Sufism to Judaism. This story goes like this. The young prince did not like palace life, so he took advantage of every chance he had to sneak out and take the path that led to the green fields and forests of the region. Only there did he felt at peace, listening to the singing of the farmers plowing the land, absorbing himself with the reflections of the sun in the streams, and watching the crickets rattling their wings like violinists. One day, passing by a farm when he was going back to the palace, he observed an old man planting some cherry saplings in the orchard near the house. It was a considerable effort for the man to dig the earth in order to plant the saplings, so the prince, intrigued, stopped by the stone wall that separated the farm from the road. "Old man," said the prince, calling the old farmer's attention, "can I ask you how old you are?" "Of course, my young friend," said the old man, who, although he had not recognized the young prince, had deduced that he must be a cultivated youth. "I am 81 years old." The prince opened his eyes in amazement. "And with your age," said the prince, "do not you think that the work you are doing is futile, since most likely you will never get to taste the cherries of those saplings?" The old man left the hoe and approached the stone wall to talk better with the young man. "Do you see those cherry trees that extend to the left of the house?" said the man, pointing beyond the walls of the farmhouse. "Those trees were planted by my grandfather." "And do you see those other cherry trees on the hill?" He turned to point to the other side. Those were planted by my father. I have been eating delicious cherries from those trees all my life. The old man continued, and I did not even have the chance to thank my grandfather for it. Is it not fair that I planted these cherry trees, even knowing that I will never taste their fruits? The prince was deeply moved by the old man's reasoning. The cherries from these saplings are not for me to eat, said the farmer. They are for my daughters, their husbands, and the children of my daughters, my grandchildren, to eat long after I have gone from this world. When many years later the prince became king, he always paid special attention to the care of the rural areas of his kingdom, since he knew that they were the ones that supplied food and resources to the cities. They gave their wealth to the whole country. But in addition, in all political and state issues, he always kept in mind in his decisions not only the population that existed in his kingdom in that moment, but also future generations, even those which would only arrive after his own death. With these priorities, the once young prince ended up going down in history as the best king his people had ever had. In this story, there is a suggestion to think about future generations, not to focus so much on ourselves, but to think more about those who come after us, and that we have to leave the environment in the right conditions so that they can survive in the best possible way. Perhaps that is why this story has been perpetuated over time and in different cultures, because it has a bearing in the survival of the species. In this line of thought, we could also include the words of our researcher from Oxford University. Her name is Hannah Ritchie, who was recently interviewed in an article published on the BBC website. You can see the reference below in the credits. This environmental scientist, who specializes in data, says that she too went through a time when she was quite worried about the state of the planet, which plunged her into eco-anxiety. But she has now overcome this fear. Hannah Ritchie comments, "So I started asking, can we continue to improve human well-being while also reducing our environmental impact? And over the last 10 years or so, according to the environmental data, there have been signs for cautious optimism. It is not inevitable that we get there, but I think there is the opportunity for us to do so." And she says something that I think is extremely important. She says, "The feeling of it is too late just leads to inaction and paralysis." This is something we will continue to insist on in Midnight Sun. Radical hope. If we think it is too late, we will go to disaster. We will go to the collapse of our civilization. However, if we think it is not too late, that we can still do a lot to mitigate the problems and move forward, we will probably avoid the worst of this climate and extinction crisis. But yes, we have to start now. That is the condition. The condition is that we have to move now. Hannah Ritchie also highlights this when she says, I think the science is very clear that it is never too late. The impacts of climate change are on a spectrum, and where we land on that spectrum depends on what we do today. The more action we take, the more climate damage we limit, she says. On more than one occasion in this program, we have discussed some scientific developments that can help us to harbor well-founded hope that we really can avoid the worst of the climate and extinction crisis. I could tell you at this point about 4 developments in the world of science that could lead us to believe that we really can change the course of events. One of them is the functioning of complex systems, how complex systems work. Planet Earth is a complex system. Ecosystems are complex systems. And human civilization itself is a complex system. We have been talking about complex open systems in some of our programs, and we have said that this complexity, this immense complexity of systems, has something that could be of great help in the struggle to avoid collapse. And that is the self-organizing characteristic of complex systems. It is possible that if we put in a little effort and begin to collaborate with the Earth system, the Earth herself will help us and generate some changes, some alterations which will allow us to mitigate the climate and extinction crisis to a great extent. Another scientific development that could give us hope is the theory of dissipative structures by Ilya Prigogine, who won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1977. According to this theory, at the moment of maximum dissipation of energy in a system, that is, when the limits of the system begin to collapse, it would be something similar to what we are beginning to experience now. Prigogine points out that a systemic attractor can suddenly be generated, which from non-local reactions self-organizes the whole system and places it at a new level of balance. This theory, applied to chemical systems by Prigogine, has its correspondences in any other complex system, be it ecological, physical, biological, or social. If we apply it to complex social systems, the systemic attractor would be composed of a dissident minority, which, through non-local connections or interconnections, could bring about a change in the entire civilizational system. And you know that here we have been talking about the research of Erika Chenoweth from Harvard University, who points out that if we manage to mobilize 3.5% of the population, social change towards sustainability would be guaranteed. And we already have many millions of people working along these lines through countless NGOs, social movements, institutions, and organizations. But we need more of them. Another scientific development that could lead to the radical hope that we will succeed in mitigating the crisis is the Gaia organic theory. From this theory, the Earth herself could give us a big surprise. The Gaia theory, not organic Gaia theory, holds that the Earth behaves as if she were a living organism. On the other hand, the Gaia organic theory, which is a variation of the previous one, says that the Earth does not behave as if she were an organism, but that the Earth is a living organism. Among the group of scientists defending this theory are, in addition to the professors from Schumacher College in Devon, UK, is Carlos de Castro Carranza from the Department of Applied Physics at the University of Valladolid in Spain. From this point of view, if the Earth not only behaves like a living organism, but is a living organism, it is quite possible that she adopts a series of survival measures, reactions, or mechanisms to recover her balance, and that with little help from us, it is possible that she manages to recover certain basic levels of stability for the maintenance of life on her. Because, according to the classical Gaia theory, one of the objectives of our planet is to preserve life on her. And finally, another scientific development, this time in the social sciences, and one that I can speak about properly because it is a theory that I myself launched in 2020, is the theory of the myths of the future, which is the theory on which the Rainbow Warriors 3.5 campaign is based. According to the theory of the myths of the future, we dispose of cultural devices developed in civilizations far distant from each other, which are designed for the transformation of a social system that is heading towards disaster. These devices can bring about a rapid transformation of society. This theory of the myths of the future has just been included in a 100-hour postgraduate course to be taught at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, in a course entitled Story Routes for Sustainable Futures. It is imparted by Dr. Alette Willis, Senior Lecturer and Chancellor Fellow in Counseling, Psychotherapy and Applied Social Science at the University of Edinburgh. This theory will be discussed shortly in this program.
According to leading social science research, we need 3.5% of the world's population to put their talents into action if we are to mitigate the effects of the climate and extinction emergency we are facing. And that is the aim of this radio space. Midnight Sun is the communication hub of the Rainbow Warriors 3.5 global campaign.
Ultimately, and because we are animated by a radical hope that we can turn things around and avoid the worst consequences of the climate and extinction crisis, we have to make a call to action. Because action is crucial to avoid the worst of this crisis. We have to act, and we have to do it by millions. We can do it. There are already many millions of us acting in the world to change things, both socially and ecologically. But we have to be more. And that is what we are trying to do from Midnight Sun and Rainbow Warriors 3.5. That is why we say to you, join the tribe of all colors, the tribe of all races, of all cultures, of all religions, of all beliefs, It doesn't matter if you are an atheist or a believer in any religion. The important thing is that you act in your daily life to avoid the worst of the climate and extinction crisis. How can you act? I answer you with a few questions. What are your talents? What do you like to do? What do you do best? Then put that at the service of the earth and the earth community of life. But we will have to integrate all of this within the framework of values, of ethical principles such as those offered by the Earth Charter, the most inclusive document that has been produced to date by the international community, with the aim of offering a planetary ethics, an ethics which is shared by almost all cultures, a document that has been endorsed twice by UNESCO. And we need to develop all that through compassion. Compassion is a very important element in this work. You will see it also in one of the myths of the future that we are working with. So, in Rainbow Warriors 3.5, we welcome people from all over the world, people from all walks of life, people who care about their fellow human beings, people who care about the people they love, their children, their grandchildren. And above all, we are inviting all those people who maybe at some point have thought about doing something for a more just society or for nature and the other species with which we share the planet, but who never dared to do it, never dared to take the step. We invite you to take the step now. That is what Rainbow Warriors 3.5 is all about. Creating small tribes, small groups of people willing to put their talents at the service of the earth and life. They can be small tribes of 4 or 5 people, tribes made up of friends or family members, tribes that will join once a month with hundreds or maybe thousands of other tribes within the complex system of Rainbow Warriors 3.5. That is what we encourage you to do. We encourage you to stand up for yourselves. We need to be a few million more to avoid the worst consequences of the climate and extinction crisis. And we already have a list of needs to create this campaign. This is what we would like to talk about. We are going to hold an informative online meeting, a preliminary meeting through Zoom, for all those people interested in being part of the change. The first meeting will be in Spanish and will take place on the 8th of March at 6 p.m. Greenwich time, and 2 weeks later we will have a second meeting in English, which we will inform you about in the next program. In these meetings, we have to talk about the needs that we already have to build the Rainbow Warriors 3.5 campaign. How can we build all this? How can we create it? And for that, we need to create at least a base tribe, what would be a mother tree, according to Susan Simard's theories, that tree that nurtures other trees around it. We will have to design an educational program from the outset. In that program, we are going to try to convey the complex systems worldview, the ecocentric organicist worldview that we collectively need to develop in order to avoid disaster. That is going to be part of the educational program that we want to do through Rainbow Warriors 3.5. We also want to see how we are going to organize ourselves. We also want to transmit to you the Earth Charter, the ethical framework that we are going to share in order to build this different world, this world that respects the Earth and her community of life, We will probably have staff from Earth Charter International at the United Nations University for Peace to teach this. And there we can also use the stories from the Earth Stories collection, stories that illustrate the different principles of the Earth Charter. In other words, perhaps you can simply help to build a better world by telling stories, telling myths, legends and folk tales from around the world, selected to transmit the vision of a sustainable world that we need to develop. We invite you, therefore, to a meeting, in Spanish this time, of Rainbow Warrior 3.5 on Friday the 8th of March at 18 hours Greenwich time. Within 2 weeks, we will call a second meeting, this time in English, for all those interested who do not speak Spanish. Do you know the Earth Charter? The Earth Charter is an international declaration of ethical principles for the respect and care of life, ecological integrity, social and economic justice, democracy, non-violence and peace. But it is also a worldwide movement which seeks to inspire in all people a new sense of global interdependence and shared responsibility for the well-being of the whole human family, the community of life and future generations, thus becoming a vision of hope and a call to action. Learn more about the Earth Charter at earthcharter.org. Earth Charter, turning conscience into action. In today's program, a wake-up call, a call to action, we talked about the research by Van Westen and colleagues that appeared a couple of weeks ago in the scientific journal Science Advances, and which fortunately has been making such an impact in the media. And although we say fortunately, we should demand more from the media, because this news should be the first headline in any media. But at least it is being talked about more, unlike 5 years ago. We have talked about the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, which, according to this research, is likely to stop in the not too distant future. We have been talking about the evolution of this stream. We have been looking at the effects that this collapse of the AMOC could have on the planet's climate, especially in Europe. In the words of Antonio Turiel from the Spanish Higher Council for Scientific Research, we have been saying that science does not pose absolute certainties. It does not make prophecies, but it does give us warnings about a risk. This does not mean that it is necessarily, inevitably going to happen. They are telling us that there is a high risk of this happening. We have been talking about Hannah Ritchie, a researcher at Oxford University, who says that hopelessness gets us nowhere except inaction and paralysis, and that we need to work from hope, as we are saying here, radical hope. From there we can avert the worst of this climate and extinction crisis, but that means taking action. We have also talked about those possibilities unknown to most people, those other developments in science that might suggest some kind of help from the complex systems themselves, mainly from the complex systems Earth. that it is possible for the Earth herself to give us a hand as soon as we act in the right direction, and there are enough of us trying to help life on Earth. And finally, we have made a call to action. We need to act now. And for that we call you to 2 meetings, one in Spanish and one in English. The first one in Spanish will take place on Friday, 8th March at 18 Greenwich time. The meeting in English will be announced in the next program within 2 weeks. Stay tuned to Midnight Suns networks because we will post a Zoom link so that anyone interested can participate. Well, then we say goodbye. We say goodbye now at Midnight Sun. Thank you for having listened to us, for having been with us up to this point. And we don't want to say goodbye without our usual thanks to Kim Robertson, the Celtic harp player who provides the program's theme tune. Thank you very much for lending us your music, Kim. Thanks to John Mario Diaz and Radio Chacaruna, the first radio station that is broadcasting this program. But we hope that many more independent radio stations will be encouraged to broadcast our program. Thanks to Blake Kendall for lending us his voice, to Marta Ventura for her voice and for moving the wheels of Midnight Sun. And I want to thank the Patreon subscribers who are supporting us financially, who are trying to help us so that we can make this program. I must say that this program, in its 2 versions, in English and Spanish, takes us 4 full days of work, of production. And as I think it is obvious, this work does not lend any income for us. That is why we are asking for help on Patreon. Last but not least, a call to action. Once again, please form a small tribe, a tribe that can be part of Rainbow Warriors 3.5. We have to make thousands, millions of tribes to avoid the worst of the climate and extinction crisis. And that means you have to step up, please. You have to step forward. We say goodbye now. May the sun shine for all of us at midnight.
To avoid the social collapse we are heading towards because of the climate and extinction emergency, we are going to need 3.5% of the population to take action. That means we need help. Lots of help. If you have an independent radio station and want to share Midnight Sun's radio programs on it, find out more at midnightsun.com.es/broadcasting. Midnight Sun, the social media hub of the Rainbow Warriors 3.5 global campaign.
Sun, el sol de medianoche.